Senator Marino's on his way as well, so you may look at me and think, okay, this is going to be the last round. Oh no, there's more that's coming on it. So don't get anxious yet to be able to get up. But I do have multiple questions I want to be able to drill down on. Dr. Ligon, you had mentioned the use of the Meta glasses in the attack in New Orleans. That was a new wrinkle there. As we look at the technology that's used and that's available locally, domestically, for planning or executing a terrorist attack, or for one of those folks wanting to video themselves while they're carrying out a terrorist attack. What else do we need to be aware of technology-wise that is amping this up? We go back to the Boston Marathon. That was a pressure cooker, locally available, obviously. It's becoming easier to be able to get instruments to be able to carry out attacks or to be able to video yourself.
Yeah, one of the luxuries of being at a university is we get to play with all this equipment and see how it might be used for both good and bad purposes. And so that is a constraint that the federal government has, is that they're not able to bring these open source tools into the building. We did a large scale exercise a couple of years ago with the AI glasses that were very similar to the ones used in New Orleans with members of the Office of Director of National Intelligence to try to urge them to rethink how we have developed these suspicious activity indicators. They were developed after 9/11. And so there's nothing on there that talks about using this sort of frontier technology to be able to plan an operation. It's all about watching someone take a picture with a camera, taking aviation lessons. And so being able to overlay how this new technology might be used for these suspicious activities, and then giving the tools and equipment to state and locals who are best in the position to observe them, I think is incredibly important, because right now the technology is developing so fast and our indicators are not keeping up.
I'm going to drill down on a couple of things. General Hoover, the Olympics, FIFA events, other things bring in a different dynamic for law enforcement as well, because you also have diplomatic security from all over the world. And international partners. When our athletes and our diplomats travel, they travel with diplomatic security or Secret Service traveling with them. It is so for other countries as well. You've got to coordinate all of those, not just local law enforcement, federal law enforcement, but international law enforcement and security as well. How is that conversation going for LA 2028? And then what do you see as a need right now in that coordination that's not already happening?
Well, Senator, I think the coordination is happening. We expect somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 or more foreign heads of state to come to LA and Oklahoma City for the
Mostly
games.
Oklahoma City.
Mostly Oklahoma City for softball and canoe slalom, for sure. Right. And we're very fortunate that the Secret Service has really taken the, as I mentioned earlier, very fortunate the Secret Service has taken the lead on that. We also work very closely with the State Department, especially on the visa issues, to make sure that we have a process in place for that. But diplomatic security is, another another aspect of just the overall training planning that we're doing now. So it's in the bucket now.
You are currently getting the coordination you need from the federal government, though, and CBP and such.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's helpful to know. I hope you had the opportunity to be able to travel to Paris and to be able to watch the Paris Olympics. I assume you did. Are there lessons that you learned from there that you see were implemented there, both for security, facilitation, coordination with the French authorities, that you're not seeing with us, or that you see hasn't started to the level it needs to, you think, in the planning at this point? This is not criticism. This is highlighting, hey, there's some areas that we need to get busy on.
Sure. I think, Senator, it's not what we're not doing, it's what we are doing. And back to Senator Hessen's point about relationships. And Paris was successful because of the relationships they had across the board in security planning and logistics planning and operational planning. And I would say that LA28 is successful because of those relationships that we've developed with our state partners, with our local partners, with our federal partners, and even the private sector as we think about operationalizing what will be the biggest games ever.
Dr. Ligon, one of the challenges that they faced in Paris was obviously an attack on some of the infrastructure, rail, electrical infrastructure. What you have described, what you're able to do in the academic setting, is to be able to think ahead. What could be possible? Where are the pinch points where we're most vulnerable on this? As you look at what happened in the Paris Olympics and where we are now in our preparation for these different global events, whether this be FIFA or whether it be our 250th anniversary celebrations coming up or the Olympics, what do you see as some of those pinch points now that we're facing that need to be addressed sooner rather than later?
Thank you for asking. We have the luxury of thinking about the future in academia. We're not under the 72-hour limit that our operators are. I look at some of the research that comes out of Century, one of our sister academic centers for excellence out of Northeastern and Rutgers, and they're using discrete math to model which of the nodes of the New Jersey Transit would be most impactful if it were attacked. And that is directly using data from the bombings that happened at the Paris Olympics. And enabling those kinds of researchers to be able to think about the different permutations. If this node were attacked that maybe is less populated, what would be the implications? And to have them to help with these exercises and to be able to get these state and locals thinking about not as what is the most probable, but also what would be the most consequential because of cascading effects. I think that's something that you can really rely on academia to do, because we do get to think about the third order effects of different decisions that we make, from crowd management and how the evacuation might happen. And I would want to just follow up on a lesson learned from Paris in that specific piece was this goes back to the Bataclan attacks that happened in Paris that was outside of another soccer event. One of the decisions that the stadium officials made was not to evacuate that stadium, even though the attacks were happening on the outside, because they didn't want to cause widespread panic. Right. I think us planning what are we going to do if an attack happens is incredibly important, because that is something that the federal government can resource right now, is that if an attack happens in this area, what is our plan for being able to evacuate that would cause the least amount of trampling and chaos? Because to me, that is what keeps me up at night about if an attack does get through, or the secondary effects. Because what we saw in Paris was they could have evacuated that stadium, and I don't know what would have happened, but I know that there are some modelers that do. And so being able to have them be able to use different big data, large language models to be able to process some of these images and prepare for that, I think is incredibly important for this committee.
All right, that's very helpful. We had talked briefly about drones and their use before. I'd mentioned in my opening statement as well that around the NBA finals that are happening in Oklahoma City right now, there were quite a few drones that were launched just around the Paycom Center. And it became a concern to local law enforcement to say, we can see them. What can we do about them? Several of you have mentioned that as an issue. What I'd like to be able to highlight is, what are the authorities that need to be in place so we don't just see a drone, but we have authority to actually stop a drone from coming at spectators or in a public venue that may not even be a spectator, just near one of the venues? Yeah,
so one of the things that happened at the Qatar World Cup that I thought was incredibly insightful was they did a large-scale exercise right before with the authorities that were in place to see how they would have handled it. And I think not only thinking right now about what authorities need to change, but also to do some exercises right before with our international partners to see, because our operating environment is so different than how it was in Qatar, the different legal authorities that we would have. And so being able to exercise that, depending on what changes happen with these 5 bills that are in Congress right now, I think are really important for real-time decision-making for those people.
Okay, that's helpful. General Hoover, thoughts on what authorities are lacking and are needed for local law enforcement or federal law enforcement at one of these events?
Well, Senator, I think the drone issue is one that's an important issue to take on, because there is that gap of we have the ability to detect. What we don't have is the authorities at the state and local level for critical owners and operators of critical facilities across the country, for large sporting events, to actually engage. And that's the gap that needs to be closed. And I think to the extent we exercise those things, it's, you know, it is an area I think that is of concern.
Okay. Mr. Kinder, obviously drones are pretty essential to be able to keep away from airspace for a multitude of reasons. What authorities are missing from our current authorities dealing with drones?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Senator. In addition to the safety and security concerns with these drones, there are operational concerns. And we saw this a few years ago in London, particularly at London Gatwick, where on the multi-day events, the operational performance of the airport is dramatically impacted. And when we think about trying to get all these people into our major airports, particularly, operational impacts are very much real as well.
Okay, thank you. Senator Moreno, you're recognized.